Hey, how you doing? My name's Will. I've got February 17th. Making a few different videos tonight. I've got about 10 after 1 in the morning. And I can't sleep making the videos because, quite frankly, God has laid some things on my heart that I feel important to convey. Not just to those who don't believe or even flat out reject God, but for those who do believe. Okay? I should start out by saying, as I've said in other videos, that I'm not a pastor, okay? Whether that is God's plans for me down the road, I don't know, and I have clearly prayed to God about it, saying that I am not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And some of you may come to that conclusion just because you disagree with what I say. But in my prayer to God, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, so if you call me to the ministry, do me a favor. Make it adamantly clear to me, because, like I said, not being the sharpest knife in the drawer, I need things, I want to know that I'm answering God's call and not doing the job of somebody else who's been called to the ministry, and I end up stepping in their place and taking the plan that God has given for somebody else for myself when it was never meant for me in the first place. I don't know that as of right now. Okay. The reason why I'm making this video is because I wanted to, this is in reference to a couple of different movies. One is Jesus of Nazareth, okay, and the other one is, many of you have probably seen it, if nothing else for the controversy, but many believers have seen this movie too, The Passion of the Christ. Now this one, yeah, this one's pretty powerful for those who've seen it. If you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to see it. The reason why this movie has struck a lot of controversy is because of the violence in the movies, in this particular movie. Mel Gibson's, being the director in this movie, he does a very good job in portraying the violent beating that Jesus took, and not only the violent beating, but the crucifixion as well. This is the Roman crucifixion was designed for the intention of not just pain to be exhibited on the body, but to humiliate, to tell those who were watching the crucifixion, don't mess around and violate the law, because this is what's going to happen to you. And while it was a very effective tool for the majority, obviously not for some people, because they were ordered to endure that sentence. But there's a difference between many of the people who were ordered to endure that and who were sentenced to that death and Jesus Christ himself. The difference is that those other men had committed crimes. Jesus had never done anything wrong, except in the eyes of the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees. He had professed to be God. He had blasphemed. He claimed to be God in the flesh and to forgive men of sins. Many people during his time didn't like that, and as a result conspired against him, tried to have him killed, things like that. And eventually, because God allowed that, because of God's ultimate plan to redeem us and to reconcile us to him, okay, God was placed there. If anyone was ever killed who never deserved it, because they never committed a crime, it was Jesus Christ. Okay? With that said, some people are just like, well, that's the crucifixion, the beating that he took at the whipping post, that was so graphic. I mean, I couldn't even, the members of the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees that were standing there, and for those who have seen the movie, they couldn't even watch the whole thing. They were satisfied with what they want, but the thing is the sentence was carried out even further by the Roman soldiers, and even the Sanhedrin members were like, okay, you know what? Yeah, he got beat. He got what we felt he deserved. You want to continue on, that's fine. But we know we believe he's getting exactly what he deserved, which is exactly wrong, because Jesus never deserved this in the first place. But while he didn't deserve it, he took it. Okay? We'll get back to that point here in a second. Many people who witnessed this crucifixion and the beating of Christ were just like, why? This isn't making any sense. He hasn't done anything wrong. But he's not doing anything to stop it. Why not? Because at the time, even if others didn't know, Jesus knew that he was submitting to the will of the Father as he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane that night before he was arrested and sentenced to this horrific death. He knew that he was submitting to the will of the Father. Even though he prayed that the cup be taken away from him in the Garden of Gethsemane, he submitted to the will of the Father, because that's why he was sent in the first place, being God in the flesh, incarnate. Okay? With that said, the reason why that kind of violence, that kind of stiff penalty was extended to Jesus, and Jesus had to endure that, but it's because God's characteristic of being that pure, that righteous, that sinless required a stiff penalty. With that said, while it required that stiff penalty was meant for each and every one of us. That was meant for me. Before I came to know Christ, that was meant for me. I should have been strapped to that whipping post. I should have been strapped to a cross in a way to die. Because that was a sentence that was transcended to me by virtue of the fall of Adam and Eve in the garden. Why? Because they were in the flesh and they disobeyed God, and through the seed of Adam brought down to us through the generations, I am just like them in the flesh. Okay? But I'm also sanctified and justified through Christ. So therefore, because of that, I no longer deserve that. Which is the reason why I'm making this video. Because while some of you who are unbelievers deserve exactly what happened there, and I'll get to the reason why here in a minute, you don't have to endure that. You don't have to endure eternity away from God because of what God did for you, because of what Jesus did for you on that cross. Here's an example that I'll get to quickly here. Okay, let's say you're driving down the road, and some people have a hard time drawing this kind of parallel, but I think in the end you'll get the point. You're driving down the road and you're driving through a school zone. Speed limit's 35. Okay, we'll just throw that out there. Okay, we'll go, at 25. Most school zones are 25. So you're going through there and you get pulled over because in a 25 you're actually doing like 60. We'll just throw that number out there. Either way, regardless of how fast above 25 you're going, you're still going faster than the speed limit. Okay? With that said, you've broken the law. Why? Because there are signs that are posted before and after the school zone saying, hey, school up ahead, 25. Go through it. That's fine. No faster than 25 miles an hour. And then there's signs usually at the end of the school zone saying, hey, you may commence your speed that you had prior to that school zone because there is no longer a danger of harming anybody in that school zone. You may now commence your normal speed. Okay? The law is there. But you get stopped by a police officer because you have violated what is clearly the law, because it is clearly posted. Okay? So you go to court, you stand before the judge, and the judge is like, okay, you know what? I'm taking your license away. Okay? You're in a state that where they have the stiffest penalties as far as this is concerned. There's no fine or anything to get your license taken away. You have anything to say for yourself? You can't. I'm guilty. Okay? I did it, and I have nothing. There's no justification. I did it. Okay? That is, if you don't deny it, and even if you know it's true. Okay, you were pulled over, citation says that, and you can have your bias against police officers, whatever the case is, but that's a whole other topic. Okay, the point is here is the fact that you're standing before the judge trying to offer some kind of reason, and if you're honest with yourself and honest with the law and honest standing before God, then you know the truth is you violated the law. When we violated the law, that's the reason why you're standing before the judge. Also, you violate God's law, which is higher than man's law. Why? Because God gave us the 10 Commandments. This wasn't to show him how much more perfect that he is than us, and to show us, there's no way you can live up to this standard or anything like that. But it's to show us his standards of perfection and righteousness and sinlessness and purity. That while there's no way that we can live up to those, by having faith and trust in him, okay, we can still experience eternity in his presence. By faith and trust in him. Faith and trust in hoping and knowing that there's a Messiah who will come to fulfill the prophecies, and now faith and trust in Jesus Christ, who has already come and fulfilled the prophecies established in the Old Testament. Okay. With that said, all of a sudden, just as the judge is getting ready to say, you know what? License revoked. You're done. I don't want you driving again. Not for a minimum, a year in my state. That kind of thing. Well, this is what the judge is thinking, but before he gets a chance to slam the gavel down, someone, a perfect stranger, who has not violated the law. Not only has he not violated the speeding law, he's never violated the law ever. Okay? Now that's something that we can't fathom, but there's something unique about this man. Okay? With that said, as he steps forward, he says, you know what? Your Honor, I'm asking you to forgive this man, and to take the penalty for what he did, apply that to me. And the judge is like, well, somebody has to pay the penalty. The law was broken. The penalty has got to be paid. And personally, I don't care who pays it, but the penalty does have to be paid. The man volunteers again. He tells you, and the judge is like, you know what? Consider the penalty paid. You are free to go. You have your driving liberties back. You have your driving privileges back. Okay? And this man is going to take it. And everybody's standing around like, what just happened? A man who did nothing wrong just stepped forward to take a penalty for something he never did wrong in the first place. Okay? Now, while the penalty was not death, in this particular case, the penalty is still the same in the fact that there's a penalty that needs to be imposed for wrongs done against the law. In that case, it's the law of man. In the case I'm referring to, it's the laws of God. Okay? The question is what are you going to do with what Jesus has done in your life? Jesus came to pay a penalty. The penalty is conveyed in one of the most powerful ways in the Passion of the Christ. For those of you who've seen the movie, if you couldn't stand to even watch the video screen because of the horrific death and the horrific punishment that he had to endure before even going to the cross in the first place, and on top of that, while he was on the cross, so many wonder, why did he cry out? Why did God turn his back on him? And just as importantly, why did Jesus himself cry out? Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which states, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why did Jesus do that? So that we wouldn't have to. My hope and prayer as you hear this is that you would realize that we have all, just like that person driving broke the speed limit there, even though you may not have broken a speed limit, maybe you never have a traffic citation in your life. Remember, while you've obeyed God's laws, and maybe that's why you're watching this video, you're a productive member of society. Okay? That doesn't mean that while you haven't broken man's law, that you haven't broken God's law, because God's law is such a higher standard that in the flesh we will never attain it. It was given to us not to show us our standards, it was to show us God's standards, 10 Commandments. These are the kind of standards that God has. Some people believe that, for example, for adultery, a lot of men have problems with this. Okay, for women they have problems with it too, but I'm gonna point men out, myself out. Have problems with adultery. The problem is that while some people consider adultery to just be sleeping with another woman while you're married, the Bible gives us a higher standard. It says that even if you look at another woman with lust in your eyes, you've committed adultery with her in your heart. And you've committed adultery against God, because it violates one of his standards. Okay? Woman was given to man to be a helpmate, not to be a sex object or, anything else that man's flesh can try to turn a woman into. Okay? Given just one example of that, here's another example as a matter of fact. Okay? Thou shalt not kill. Okay? Even though you may not have physically murdered another person or taken another life or anything like that, if you have an unjustified anger against another human being, in God's eyes that's the same thing as killing somebody. Okay? With that said, those are God's standards. We have violated every single one of God's standards at some point in time in our life. That is the reason why the ultimate penalty was carried out against Jesus. An example of that was in that movie that you saw, and if you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to do so. Okay? Many of you watching this video who have seen the movie or who are about to see the movie will not be able to keep your eyes on the screen, because the horrific punishment that Jesus endured in that movie over 2,000 years ago and is reconveyed, re-dramatized, and recreated in this movie was carried out on him, and he didn't deserve it. But why was it carried out on him? It was meant for us. Okay? I think it's 2 Corinthians 5:21. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, that in him we might be made in the righteousness of God. Okay? With that said, look at what Jesus has done for us. He took a sin, he took sin on his shoulders because he knew that we deserved the punishment, but he didn't want us to have to go through that punishment. Okay? We all owe that penalty for sin. And my hope and prayer is that in watching this video, you can realize that and come to that acknowledgement. The first thing is to acknowledge that. Second thing is to realize that, okay, well, if I have sinned and I start to realize that, now what do I do? Well, if you're realizing that, that tells me that the Holy Spirit is starting to work inside of you and tell you that while you have sinned, there's still hope for you. Okay? You need to confess that sin. Not to me. Not to anybody else. They can help you and pray with you. But ultimately you're praying it to God. Why are you praying this prayer to God? Because so many people say, well, God knows everything. If God knows everything, why do I have to tell God what I've done? Because He already knows what I've done wrong. Well, the reason why you're telling God that you've done wrong is not because He doesn't know. It's because so that He knows that you know you've done wrong. That's the whole purpose. Is to get you to acknowledge your need for Him. Okay? Not because He doesn't know, like I said. So that He can hear you acknowledge it. Okay? He knows whether you're going to or not, but this isn't about what He knows. It's about your submission to Him. Okay? His foreknowledge of this is what allowed Jesus Christ to come and die for you in the first place. Now it's up to you as to what you do with what Jesus has done for you. Do you accept it or do you reject it? My prayer is if you've seen that movie and you have just a fraction of an idea of what Jesus endured that day and spending 3 days in the grave and then rising again, you will see that He paid a price that we couldn't pay for a debt that He never owed. Okay? I ask you, and I pray that you can seriously consider this in your search for God. Okay? And I pray if you get a chance to watch the other videos that I posted out there, not because the message that I think that I'm anything significant or anything like that. I'm a messenger for God. That's what God has called me to do in the remainder of my years, regardless whether it's another 5 minutes or 50 years and 5 minutes on this earth. Whatever the case is, the whole purpose is to spend it serving God. Okay? And to spend it helping and encouraging and challenging others who do believe in God to do just that, to serve God. And for those who don't know God or those who reject God, to let you know that it's not too late. Okay? God loves you just as much as He loves me. And He's keeping me closer to Him. And in the process of keeping me closer to Him, I choose to, through submission to the Holy Spirit, I want you to know the same message that gave me the peace and joy that I've never felt before. Never felt before. That same peace and joy can be yours. I couldn't find it in a bottle. I drank for a long time, not just when I was active duty, after I got out of the Corps too. Okay? But nothing can substitute for what I've got. Did I walk away from God at one point in time? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Because I followed the deception, the lies that Jesus, not that Jesus gave me, but that the devil gave me. Because he knows what the genuine article is. If you've watched one of the previous videos, you'd realize what the genuine article is. The real deal. And I took my eyes off of that and focused on the deception that Satan had. And then even when I realized it, I still walked away from God. I'm not happy to say that, but that's the truth. Okay? But just as honest as I'm being about that then, I'm being just as honest right now when I tell you that God has totally changed my life around. He's given me blessings that I never thought that I would have, and I definitely don't think I deserve. And you know what? I don't deserve them. But God loves me enough that He's giving me those blessings anyway. Will He give you those blessings? He will if you ask, and if you turn your life over to Him. The question is, will you? I encourage you, if you're watching this video and if you don't know how to pray, it doesn't have to be anything fancy and it doesn't have to be at church at an altar. It can be at the altar of what I like to call the altar of your heart. Just by asking God, you know what? With everything I have in me, I don't know how to pray, but I give my life to you, God. I know for a fact that you've given your life for me. I know for a fact that you sent Jesus Christ to die for me on the cross. And the reason why He died on the cross is because I screwed up in your eyes. I've totally screwed up in your eyes. And I can't do anything about that myself. But you've already done something for me, and I accept by faith what you have done for me. It doesn't have to be exactly what I just prayed. Okay? As long as it's from your heart, and you truly mean it, that's all that God cares about. Okay? If you are a believer, I pray that you stay in God's will. I encourage you and challenge you to do just that. I thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and hope and pray that this just plants one of many seeds and encourages you and challenges you in many ways so that you can answer the call for what God has called you to do in your life. Thank you again. God bless you.